Okay, welcome everyone to CrisisCon Deep Dives. Really appreciated everyone that made it last week for our shorter sessions, but there was enough interest in some additional CFPs that had come in for some longer form topics that I thought, why not take advantage of this and try and get some more good content out there. So with that, I have Casey Brooks, who is my colleague actually at Dragos right now, who's going to provide us with a deep dive into establishing a taxonomy for cyber intelligence analysis to sort of further our ability to conduct cyber threat intelligence in a ever murky world. So with that, Casey, whenever you're ready, the con is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. So my name is Casey Brooks. I will be doing a presentation on essentially how to create a taxonomy for cyber threat intelligence analysis and why it's a good thing to do so. So let's get started. And here's the obligatory bio slide. Not going to spend much time on this, but yes, I came from the United States Army, where I was trained as a cryptologic network warfare specialist, a cyber operations specialist, with some specialization in Russian nexus, computer network exploitation, and computer network operations. So what we're going to be going over, I'm going to go over essentially what is a taxonomy, why is a taxonomy important, who can utilize a taxonomy in cyber intelligence analysis, when you should use a taxonomy, and how do you actually build one. And so for that, let's go ahead and get started with what is a taxonomy. A taxonomy is essentially just a classification system that you use to break down different pieces of information or data into a more easily understandable whole. So as you can see here, this is a taxonomy of cyber intelligence variables that I utilize. And essentially, I just took parts of different aspects of cyber threat intelligence. So whether it had to do with looking at kill chain information, at incident data, or looking at OSINT reporting when it comes out. I like to take apart different pieces of data that I collect and analyze to make it, one, more easily understandable, also to make it more easy to verify if a certain analytical point is challenged. And overall, it's just a very clean and consistent way to organize your data when you're performing analysis. It also assists in creating better intelligence products, in my opinion, because you're able to see all your data and collect it all and be able to present it in a format that's easily understandable, and then you can follow through with it. So why a taxonomy is important. As I said before, they provide a consistent structure for information to be put together that enables analysts to improve their analysis and resulting intelligence products. Now, the way that this becomes important is because you can actually go through different steps and say, okay, well, I'm looking for this kind of information. Where do I find that in all of the data that I've collected? Okay, I found all the data that I've gone through all the data that I've collected, put it into its different spots, and now I have easy reference points for when I'm actually doing analysis and then generating the resultant product. And that's where this analytical roadmap comes from. You can start looking at where you need to either perform additional collection, where you need to refine some of your analytical points that you were trying to present in your intelligence product, as well as be able to easily also reference them to say, hey, this is why I came to this conclusion. This is why this is important, or this is how my assessment was formed because I followed this series of data points. It's also a check against analytical biases and logical fallacies because you can look at the data that you've collected in its spot and be like, okay, I'm performing mirroring bias here, or I'm making an assumption about a adversary or an activity, and I don't really have the data to back that up. It also forms like a key database because you can then reference it in a historic perspective when new activity is observed, or you collect more information on new activity. You can see a change in how adversaries have occurred, or if a certain tactic looks to becoming more favorable, or they're just maintaining a consistent operational tempo. So who can best use this? Now, the thing that I like to focus on in intelligence analysis is assisting other analysts and helping them get past certain analytical points. Some of it can be technical, some of it can also be the actual analysis itself. Dealing with the large amount of data that intelligence analysts work with on a daily basis, that we ingest, that we have to review, that you have to look at, even other intel vendors, and they've gone through their own intelligence cycle process to come up with those products, and it can also become very overwhelming. And so having a taxonomy where you can take all that information and break it down to its key pieces in the way that you view it, or that's important for your analytical processes, is why it is a very foundational step before you begin analysis or to implement it into your analytical process. Me, for one, I usually have difficulty in actually the direction of an investigation or in the product to develop, because I'm kind of older school where I just want to sit there and collect. I don't really produce a lot of reporting unless it acquires like very timely, accurate reporting. And so it actually gives me the roadmap to be like, okay, this does qualify because I have all the information I need to actually produce this. Another important point for taxonomies is that it helps you build processes for your analyst at a manager or senior analyst level or principal analyst level that ensures that you have consistent quality in your reporting, that you can backtrack through the whole analytical process and look at the data that this analyst used to actually produce these products. That's why it becomes very important in these steps about building a taxonomy and then going forward in analytical processes or processes. It's not a difficult task. It's just following a consistent process and consistently filling out the actual information that you want, instead of just ingesting everything and trying to make sense of all the different pieces of a report or telemetry or any other kind of data. So when should a taxonomy be used? Me personally, I use it a lot in planning and direction, collection, and analysis parts of the intelligence cycle. Now, it's not limited. You could use it almost anywhere. It's all about creating a structure for yourself that allows you to view your data and to make it more sensible. Inside of a lot of the planning and direction, it really assists in developing what your questions are, if you're going to perform a hunt, actually what the hunt should be focused on, and different things of that nature. And another important piece is it also assists you in identifying intelligence gaps, or information gaps, where you're lacking certain pieces, where you can't fully connect the picture. And I know that sometimes whenever you're reading a report, you're like, okay, this is just technical data. It doesn't really give me like why the adversary conducted this operation, like the process in which they did it. It's more just like bland, flat features of like, this is what the malware did. And so it's very good when you're performing your analysis to uh, collect all the information to fill in those gaps, and then also to in your product say, hey, we don't have this information, so we can't provide it for you. It gives more integrity to your product by admitting that, look, we don't have all the information. This is what we have, and this is what we couldn't collect or whatever. All right, so taxonomies in planning and direction. When we're looking at this, direction, you're really developing how you're going to perform your analysis. In this case, I use an example of adversary hunting. And I'm looking at the information that I want to collect. I want to collect intrusion variables. I want to collect data about how the adversary acts, which is adversary variables in my system. Systemic intrusion variables are ones that are typically seen inside of intrusion. So the data usually lines up. You can look at it as a cyber kill chain. You can look at different pieces of MITRE's framework. All these are different kind of variables of data that you can pull in that will help direct your hunt later on. So you're saying, I want to collect this information, which will then give me results later on. Now, in planning, the question generation portion of it in planning is important in that you're trying to make uh, you're trying to question, like, why is an adversary doing this? What activity did the adversary do, and how can I understand what the adversary did? This is where your taxonomy really comes in. Is you can actually map out the fields that you need to fill out to actually get these questions, or to answer your questions that you're generating. And then into the hypothesis generation, you're going to make your general hypothesis statement, and this will actually help you construct it to make it more sense to uh, align with the data that you want, and also to have unexpected additions, such as like, oh, well, I didn't think about this, so I need to add this, or I need to collect on this information because I didn't even think about that and it was missing. So taxonomies and collection. So incident information, data, events, and anomalies, you typically collect things like this. Now, being able to take that and organize it in a sensible manner is also helpful with a taxonomy. You get to be able to piece it apart so you're not constantly shifting around saying, like, okay, where was this seen? Where was this seen? You can actually break it down and have all your data classified and collected into one place, and it makes it a lot easier during your collection step by having this system open up, and also steps you through a process of, this is the information I want first, this is the information I want next, and then this is the information that I want last. And that's why I have on here, like, so typically during an IR process, you'll want host and network, or you want anomalies. Then you'll start doing an investigation out, and you'll expand the investigation out into open source data. Is there infrastructure or additional infrastructure that you can see? Is there information on your capabilities? And then you'll go into collaboration data, where where you talk to other analysts. You're like, hey, what methodologies do you know? Is there something I should be looking at? Are there additional indicators about this current campaign or activity that I need to look for? And so this allows you to step through your investigatory process and identify the information and the process which you want to actually roll through your actual analytical investigation. All right. Now, taxonomies and analysis. This is where it really becomes very important. So these are just different structured analytic techniques that you can do. And this is where if you have a taxonomy, which mine has lots of different features, and yours could be much more simple. But I'm showing you these for the fact that this is the information that I want to collect inside of there. So cone of plausibility, intent and impact. Is there a certain intention that a adversary or threat actor wants to do? Is there a potential impact? So Dragos, we focus on ICS security, and we don't want adversaries to cause disruption. So I really want to look at only adversaries that can impact or have a specific impact. And from that, I can actually go through plausible scenarios and do some scenario building to create different types of activity that I should look for. Now we go into backcasting. Backcasting is looking pretty much at one point in time and going backwards from there to see what scenarios you can build. So if this is an impact, this is what I can see. Or in this case, if I see a certain activity on a host, can I track all my information with my taxonomy back to network activity so I can see a full picture? And the same thing goes for going from network activity down to host activity. Now, morphological analysis, you're looking at different scenarios. You're looking at these are the broader scenarios, like this is my adversary, this is what they're going to target, this is how they're going to conduct an attack, and then this is the impact. This gives you a wide range of scenarios that you can use your data to look at and see, one, as a defensive like participate in defensive actions, like is this what an adversary could do? Is it possible? Do we have defenses in place? Do we have mitigations in place? Are there even countermeasures that we can see, or are we lacking visibility? And then also it assists you in some hunting where you see certain types of infrastructure being set up and you're saying, okay, if this type of infrastructure is being set up, does this lead to a certain possibility of an attack, or does it allow for a capability to be deployed which will ultimately result in a certain type of impact? And these are very good in presenting analytical scenarios to decision makers and saying, like, the reason that we want you to not allow any through your firewall is because of these reasons, and this gives you a far stronger data point, far stronger case than just saying, oh, it's best practices. You're showing data that you've analyzed, like, this is why we want you to perform these fixes. Now, blind spot identification. Blind spot identification is mainly, again, looking for intelligence gaps. Is there a piece of an attack cycle that you have never even analyzed? Is there a spot that you didn't even consider? Is your overall analysis looking at certain types that shouldn't shouldn't even be in your analysis? Like, do you even want to include this data? Is it superfluous or anything of that nature? And then another part that we often run into is complete victimology. A lot of narrow-mindedness can go into investigating adversary activity. You're a lot of, oh, hey, they're going after me, so they must only be going after me. And in which case, if you're not fully aware of the victimology, you could be like, okay, it may not be as targeted. It could just be just trying as many knobs and or doorknobs and windows as possible. And that's really where you want to look at your taxonomy and say, hey, is there something that I should be collecting on? Is there a reason that I'm not collecting on? Do I not have availability? So then I look at it and go, how do I make this data available to me? Do I have to collaborate more? Do I have to push for more funds to get more data in this particular area? And so that it also is another case that helps your analysis and ability to conduct analysis. Now, key assumptions check. When you're looking at this, you want to see if the data actually matches up with an assumption you're making about why an adversary conducted a certain type of operation, or the end result or impact of an operation. Was it an unintended consequence? Was this the actual reason why the adversary was conducting the activity? Now, your data can lead you down that path. It can tell you a story as long as you allow it and don't fall to some biases or logical fallacies. And so the taxonomy that you create and that you want is one that really opens up the ability to get away from placing yourself in the adversary's shoes and just following what data you have and allowing the data to speak for itself in your analysis. Now, this also has the benefit of being able to look at correlation and causation. where by breaking it up, it kind of breaks up the story that you could see, and you can gain additional insight. You're like, just because this happened doesn't mean this was the result, or this was why the adversary did it. So it has a good effect on being able to prevent the causation is not correlation, or correlation is not causation, that type of thinking. And then inside of drivers, triggers, and foci, you can actually take different data points that aren't focused around your specific object, or around your specific analytical subject, and look at this is where you can collect additional like taxonomies that are filled out for specific incidences, which we'll get into in a little bit. And essentially, this is, you're looking at, was there a triggering event? What was the reason? What can you assess from the reason that this adversary conducted this activity? Was there a certain factor? Was it the victim? Was it a specific vulnerability that they were trying to exploit? Different things that you can look at and assess that your data can help support. And again, that focuses a large part on adversary activity. So now we get into the meat and potatoes portion of this. How do you build a taxonomy for use in cyber intelligence analysis? So one, you got to start with data points you already know, things that you already collect on. Cyber kill chain information, MITRE ATT&CK, your own telemetry and logging. These are great portions to start. Now, you then go into adding data points that you see in other analytical products that you find useful, that you utilize in analysis, but you haven't ever had a chance to add it. And then you also have to consistently review your taxonomy. Is this data point in the taxonomy too big? Am I stuffing too much information into it to make it not as useful? Are there parts of this that I can reduce down into finer classifications so that it's easier to understand the information that I'm collecting? And so I'll go back to this actual taxonomy that I built, that I use whenever I'm developing analytical products, and also while I'm conducting analysis. So a lot of this is basically cobbled together from cyber kill chain, from the diamond model, from MITRE ATT&CK, as well as just pieces of information that I encounter that I was like, okay, well, I don't know where to put this, so I'll create a classification for it under where I suspect it should go. There is no right or wrong way to build a taxonomy. It is as unique to the analyst as a defender is, or a adversary is when they're conducting operations. It's just what works best for you. And so when I go through this, I look at different things. Some of this focuses more on strategic pieces, some of this focuses more on operational pieces, and also some of it focuses primarily on tactical or technical pieces. And so when you're analyzing the information, you can start with this big old chart or whatever, or you can just go into your own and just say, this is the information I collect, this is how I like classify it and space it out, and separate it. And then how best can I make it more granular? How best can I make it more understandable so that I can reference it as I'm doing my analysis, or how I can do it to improve my collection efforts? And then you go into your actual analytical processes where you're saying, I can follow the story up to a certain point, but at that point, I either don't have enough data, or the data isn't pointing me a certain specific direction. And so that's where you can perform some more structured analytic techniques to try to get you to a more concrete foundation, or that it actually helps you go back and refine your analysis so that you can get to that portion where it makes sense, where the data supports what your assessment is. And so we go to conclusion. So how does this help you prevent analysis paralysis? This gives you insight into what data you have, what data you don't have, what data you want, and what data you don't want. This is a classification system for breaking down essentially what you want inside of your analytical products, as well as what information is relevant to you, so you're not constantly drowning in information. It allows you to look at the data that you have and to reference it, and during certain, like if you're having an analytical challenge or you're having trouble generating your product, this is what will assist you in presenting information that is, one, coherent, and another that will support what you're saying, so that you can say, hey, this is how I came to this conclusion, this is why it's important, and this is why I'm producing this intelligence product. And by doing that, this will make your analytical products that much stronger. It'll make your analysis that much better because of its ability to deliver that story that you're trying to deliver to the decision makers. All right. And that's all the time, or that's all I have for right now. So questions and answers.
Well, I know I have some, but I
Okay.
will let, I don't know if you can see the question and answer panel, Casey, because I am
Yep.
still
Yep.
having problems with mine. Is there anything in there?
Uh, let me see. I just see chat.
Okay. If anyone has questions or something you'd like Casey to
Oh, wait,
talk
I see
about,
it.
okay.
All right, I see it now. Okay. Alfredo Reyes, when you fill in data in your taxonomy, do you also include when, where it was collected? Yes, I typically will do that. It's usually the best, like I will put the data point in and then just like put a tag on it with a number. And then while I'm doing collection and filling in the data, I will actually put like number one is this. So whenever I see that number, this is where I got it from. Okay. Couldn't development of taxonomy create anchoring bias. What things can you do to prevent bad taxonomy elements creating long-running analysis problems? So that's a good question. So the anchoring bias is typically observed usually in the actual analytical portion. When you're dealing with the actual data and piecing it together, you can look at it and say, oh, hey, I think this should go here, but another person could say it should go somewhere else. It's really the refinement of it, being able to look at it and say, does this make sense to you as an analyst? Does it actually give you better better results than if you couldn't utilize these elements or classifications inside of your uh, taxonomy? So I would say that anchoring bias isn't usually that point unless you're getting into more strategic, or if you're heavily relying on historical information inside your taxonomy, that can create anchoring bias because you're not looking at other possibilities, other ways of explaining the information. You're relying on older information. So that's one way.
So just to follow up on that one,
Oh,
Casey, a little bit. So this is something that I've always considered and always been a little bit worried about in my own work, that in going through the effort to do something like building a taxonomy of a given set of activity or what it is that you're tracking, that that very investment of time and effort results in a creating that anchoring bias because now you're wedded to the work you put in before. So is there something that you recommend or have observed in your own work as far as ensuring that taxonomies are flexible or that you have the ability to adjust, revise, or move on from them as new data appears?
yeah. So a lot of that. So you see like this big. Oh, let me go over here. Hold on. So like in my taxonomy, so you see this like big chart. I'm not expecting to fill out all of these. And if I'm probably either bullshitting myself or really, really stretching, because not all of this information is always going to be available. But what is being able to move from the highest tier to the highest tier of your variable to the next stage. So I go from like the attack cycle variables. If I can satisfy myself in uh, like what the adversary did in compromise, as well as establishment, like I can see their infrastructure, and then I move into the intrusion variables. What did they do in that? And I will fill those out. And so being wedded to the work that you already put in, that can, I mean, you're making it easier for yourself because you're just putting the data in basic classifications. You're not creating this big full-blown analysis. And then when you actually produce your analytical assessment or your work, you can look at it and go, okay, well, I can see where I started making mistakes, or I started like kind of being too like started having anchoring bias, and go back from there. You don't have to start all over. You can look at what pieces of information are impacting your analysis. And again, if it turns out to be wrong, it's okay to be wrong as an analyst. It's just being able to go back and see where you made that mistake to fix it, and to also recognize why that information led you down an alternative path like that than what ultimately was true. That make more sense, or did I just like?
No, that does. That's good to hear. And actually, I think that's a really good lead in. There's a question in chat about kind of walking through an example of how you use this framework. And you kind of did there, but I think to illustrate that point and even just the initial construction a little bit, are you able to do something along those lines off the cuff right now, or is that a little difficult?
No. Okay. So, we can look at it as, let's say you're looking at or you get incident information and you say, okay, in an IR concept, what information do I need? You start collecting that information, um, and you say, based on the information I have that I got, um, I need to collect additional information to be able to put everything together. And so you start working like either forwards or backwards from the point that you start receiving the first pieces of information. That's usually the best way to look at it. Is it's not going to be a structured flow, but that's usually in the collection phase. Is you're just trying to grab as much information as possible. It's when you get to your analysis is you start at one point and move forward, either like in my section, left to right or right to left. And you can also do this in scenario building. You can do this in actual like preparatory like intelligence warnings, where you're trying to say like, this is assessed to be possible based on the information that we have, and here's all the information. And so that's going from like, this is the effect that an adversary could want to cause, and this is why we need to defend against it. I'm trying to think of a good example. So let's go with dim alloy. Dim alloy watering holes. Okay. So around, is this okay to say, Joe?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay.
So for those
Okay.
who are following along, Dim Alloy is a activity group tracked by Casey and I at Dragos. And for those looking for relevant or closely related activity, it aligns closely with the Berserk Bear or
Yeah.
Energetic Bear.
Berserk Bear, Dragonfly 2,
Yep. Okay.
uh,
Yeah.
Temp Isotope for Fire Eye people.
Yep.
And so basically, they're creating watering holes. Now, they've utilized watering holes in the past, and like looking at it, like hunting for it, you'd say, okay, so this adversary, I'm going into like my planning and direction. This adversary, I want to try to find their infrastructure. This adversary, where would they put their watering holes to collect the most credentials? Because from the information that I have, I know that they like to target either industrial verticals or other electric verticals. Or I'm sorry, oil and gas, engineering, manufacturing, different verticals of that nature in the energy sector as well. And so I look at it and go, if I can start filling it out, I would look at exploitation. What exploitation are they using? They're using an SMB or a SMB watering hole credential harvesting method. All right. So I know how they're doing exploitation. Is there a way that I can find out, like I can search for that, like I can look for it on websites that I believe their general victimology would target? Yes. Okay. So how do I do that? Now you go into your defender variables or something. Like, how can I collect this information? So once I do, so I would go into I like using URL scan. URL scan is very effective at finding Berserk Bear or dim alloy watering holes. And so I would say, okay, now that I know how to find them, I need to look at victimology. What is my assessment that the victimology is currently happening? So last year, there was a large pivot by dim alloy into going away from targeting energy vertical victims to just basically watering hole everything in Ukraine that they could. And it was actually a very big change in how they operated. They went from compromising energy websites like in 2017 and 2018 to compromising news websites, compromising sports websites, compromising entertainment websites is a very different leap. And being able to basically look at it and go, okay, well, I was wrong because I didn't even think to look at that. I was more focused in my energy industrial verticals that I wanted to focus in. I wasn't seeing activity, but I knew that activity was going on. And so I was able to go back and change and like reorientate my collection efforts based upon the information that I was getting. Like I wasn't getting any results off of industrial verticals, but I did find one by just general scanning, like just scanning across pretty much everything in Ukraine. And so it was like, oh, okay, so they actually pivoted, and now my information is leading me down a alternative analytical path. It's showing me that for whatever reason, I don't know, the adversary decided to shift from purely energy to focusing largely in Ukraine, um, and also focusing in different verticals that I wouldn't normally analyze. And so then I would start looking at what's the reason why would they do this? Is it about the victim, or is it about the people who visit the victim? Is it they want to cast a bigger net, or they're counting on certain victims that they actually want to do and to go into to like hit their watering holes, and they collect their credentials, and then they conduct additional operations, typically for espionage. And so that's where you start walking yourself through based upon the data that you're receiving. And yes,
Okay, very
I
cool.
believe the deck will be shared. If that made sense, I probably just rambled for like 10 minutes.
I'm used to it.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Is the taxonomy sort of the pins on the analyst wall that you look to fill, updating if needed to support your analyst? Yes, it can. It's essentially that. It's how you collect your data, the your pin board, and you. It's a lot less yarn because they are existing as individual points in your analysis, as opposed to, or they're individual data points as opposed to you're just trying to stitch it all together. That's for the analytical portion. A large part of this focuses on collection, identifying what information you need. So as you go through it, you can really look at it and say, okay, um, is this information relevant? Does it need to even go inside of here? No, not really. It's just kind of an extraneous point, or it's not relevant to my investigation. A lot of that, if you're looking at like the difference between certain adversary operators, a lot of the data, like the MITRE attack matrix, you'll see a lot of overlap in the way that they conduct exploitation, or that they're doing command and control. And so you kind of want to create a taxonomy, a smaller, like more mobile taxonomy for individual like incident cases if you're performing incident analysis, as opposed to you're doing a lot more strategic analysis. Strategic analysis is usually more stable, and you can have a larger, more permanent taxonomy, as opposed to once you get down to operation or technical or tactical, you'll probably have smaller ones that just cover certain incidents. And that will also allow you to do incident review a lot easier. Is there another question? Oh, Aurora Bloom asks, how often do I update my taxonomy? I usually update it probably about every 3 months. Due to, or if like I see a new like interesting or novel way to look at a piece of data. A lot of what comes out of MITRE kind of makes me think about different things like MITRE ICS, MITRE pre-attack, MITRE attack, all are very great at developing taxonomies because they give you a large classification for certain pieces of data. And you can say, well, I don't have visibility into this type of data, so do I need to push for more collection, or is it even relevant to what my actual job is, like if you're a network analyst as opposed to like a forensic or a host analyst? And it is very unique to it is also unique to the analyst. So just building one, it's essentially you're just looking at, this is the information that I typically can collect. This is what's important to me. That gives you a very, very strong foundation in creating your taxonomy, first off. And then you look at and you say, like those, gee, I would really love to have this kind of information. And you would put that into your taxonomy. And then that also gives you a stronger case for pushing for like additional visibility in your network or additional collection capabilities, such as like you're asking for a certain scanning service or a certain, like if you want like a passive total, or risk IQ, now they are, account, like to give you better visibility. Those are the types of things that you really want to include when you're updating, is to look at those like blind spots or areas that you really need to refine your collection, as opposed to the basic stuff you're always able to collect or that you are highly likely to have the ability to collect. It gets kind of weird when you start getting more into the territory of like insider threat, because insider threat is usually treated as like a completely different section, and there's like privacy protection, all that. So if you start treading into those waters, you might want to like reassess and be like, okay, if I'm dealing with what I suspect to be an insider threat and I'm not an insider threat analyst, then I need to come up with some information about how to complete my analysis without treading into those waters. Okay, Alfredo Reyes said, back to your example with dim alloy, when you noticed that new verticals were targeted, how do you track that changes have occurred in the rest of your categories? I'm not sure what you mean. Like, are you talking about like, so typically, like I will have an old, like I have like a solid base, and then for each incident that I'm analyzing, I will just fill in a new taxonomy. And then once I'm complete with that, or once I'm in the analytical portion, I will go back and review to see if anything has changed or lined up, or if a certain thing has occurred, then I will usually create like, I'll have like an analyst like notebook or something, not the actual like IBM analyst notebook, an actual like pen and paper notebook where I track like different changes in adversaries, or like just notes to remember, be like, okay, well also look here, or I need to update this portion or something like that. And I typically will review that like at the end of a week. All right, any other questions?
Well, if you're not seeing anything else, Casey, I'm not seeing anything else either. Give people just a few more seconds, but otherwise, I think that was some pretty good discussion based off the material. So thank you for supporting that.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, it was so short.
Yep, that's good. We had, good 15 plus minutes of discussion, which means people were engaged. So that's a very good thing.
Right. Yeah. And you can also, if you have any other questions about this, you can send me a DM on Twitter. I'm at Drunk Binary, and I'm more than happy to help, especially if you need help building one. I can work with Joe and use his website and put some directions on how to build one. But again, another great place to actually look is Rob Johnson's paper on. Let me find it. This actual one, this is on DDIC's website, but it's developing a taxonomy of intelligence analysis variables. This is a very, very good paper on reading through. They use a lot more of the actual like real world secret non-cyber words in it, but it does have a lot of very good lessons on creating taxonomies.
Cool.
All right.
Okay. Well, unless there's anything else, I will bring this to a close. So a reminder, this is the first of 3 talks that we'll have this week, all approximately the same time. We'll be 1 hour or 2 hours earlier tomorrow, where I will be talking about cyber warfare. So get to look forward to hearing my voice for a little while. And then on Thursday, we'll have Ron Brash talking about software-defined radio for GPS spoofing for ICS impacts. So got some additional content coming out. I will talk with Casey about posting slides, and as usual, there will be a recording of this posted, maybe not this evening, but certainly by tomorrow or the next day for those who need to review some of this. But otherwise, thank you everyone so much for attending. And with that, I will let everyone get on with the rest of their day or their evening, depending on where you're dialing in from.